Well, it looks as though things aren't going quite too well for Amazon's The Rings of Power. We've had reports of sets burning down. It seems like someone's trying to tell them something. We've had reports of horses dying, I guess because they couldn't stand the stench of absolute dog shit writing that we know season 2 is going to be. And to make matters worse, it seems like as Amazon claimed, this big successful show that brought in billions and gazillions of viewers actually turns out not to be the case, as we're now having reports that only 37% of viewers finished Amazon's The Rings of Power, which is very bad. Yes, it is, because what we're dealing with is a $1 billion flop. Just a total waste of time. You'd be better off just chucking that money down the toilet rather than pumping it into Rings of Power. But again, this tells you all you need to know for what to expect when it comes to season 2. No one is going to have any interest whatsoever. You already fucked it with the first season. So, and just looking at that headline, that's just going to diminish even further. But we were told billions of people, millions upon millions of people watch this show. It's a great success. Even Jennifer Solke is deluded herself into thinking it's a success, as we're soon seeing this article. But let's see what the gist of this is. So the Hollywood Reporter is out with a big new report about Amazon Prime original productions, which Amazon has been throwing money at for years now, yet they arguably have yet to produce the sort of brand-defining programming that other streaming services have. Good luck with that with The Rings of Power. It doesn't seem like that's going to pay off, does it? Despite a few hits here and there from The Boys to Jack Reacher. A chunk of the piece centers on Lord of the Rings of Power series, developed mainly because Jeff Bezos wants his own Game of Thrones for the service. Another thing that didn't pay off. Never did Game of Thrones numbers, did it? But despite a $1 billion spend, again, none of this information is really new. It's very obvious. When you have something as terrible as Rings of Power, and it is terrible. It's not, it's fine. No, it's terrible, really terrible. So it's not really big news anyway that like barely anyone could make it through the series. I'm pretty sure we could assume that anyway, just based on the product that was provided. But the report says that just 37% of viewers finished the entire series. That is quite bad. Amazon is trying to say otherwise, of course they are. Amazon Studios chief Jennifer Solke, who needs to lose her job because she's not very good, pushes back on the idea. She says this desire to paint the show as anything less than a success, well, I mean, that desire comes out of the fact that it's not a success. I don't know, again, it's just delusional. It's not reflective of any conversation I'm having internally, because I, who works for Amazon, says so. She goes on to pump up the second season. That's a huge opportunity for us. The first season required a lot of setting up. Really, what did you set up? Still don't know nothing about any of your characters. They're all shit. I don't know why they think they spent 8 episodes doing nothing. So there was no setting up going on, but that was what we heard throughout the whole of that. Oh, we're just setting things up. It's like, yeah, generally shows don't set up things as slow as The Rings of Power did it. But that's what Jennifer Solke seems to believe, that, oh, this show's a success. It's not. It's not. It cost them $1 billion, and the only way they make money from The Rings of Power is if people subscribe. Do we think people are subscribing based on The Rings of Power? No. That's not happening. And even for that to bring in any sort of money, any sort of just bringing in more cash, it's like how many subscribers do you think you need to pull in order to make up for $1 billion? Don't see it happening. Generally speaking, the story required a lot of setting up. It is not a great excuse for why something was lackluster. Exactly. as setup was almost most of Game of Thrones season 1. Look how much stuff we done in Game of Thrones season 1. Was anyone at HBO saying that when oh no, we're just all setting it up? No, there was stuff happening every episode. Started off with the first episode, brings you straight in. You're already like, right, I want to see what's next. Whereas with the Rings of Power, just off the bat, maybe 5 minutes into the show, you're like, yeah, I give up. I'm just going to continue watching to roast it. And that's about, we didn't have that with Game of Thrones season 1. Again, you have all these other examples of specifically fantasy shows, and you can compare the two and go, oh yeah, well that one over there clearly did it right, and that one did it clearly wrong. Leading to its explosive finale, but it was an excellent series of television all the same. As for the 37% number, that's bad. There's no spinning that. Rival Netflix usually cancels most shows that come in under 50% completion. Squid Game, its mega hit, had 83% completion. So, yeah, you start to see how bad it really is when you compare it to how well the completion is on other shows. Sure, Netflix is in a somewhat different position, given that you can binge all their shows at once, so completion is easier. But you can turn to HBO instead if you want with its weekly airings. The first season of Game of Thrones had more viewers by the end than it did at its finale. House of the Dragon went down a little bit by the end, but you can blame that on a larger than usual initial surge because of its Game of Thrones connection. Meanwhile, just last month, The Last of Us more than doubled in its initial live viewership by the end of the season. A 37% completion rate is bad. It signifies fading interest in the show. That, again, that was predicted from the very, because they released both episodes on the same day, and just after watching that, it's like, yeah, that's just going to fall off very quickly, which is unfortunate because it did get somewhat better in later episodes. No, it got worse. I'm really surprised this guy's saying that, because the guy that wrote this article was one of the guys that was absolutely tearing the Rings of Power apart. But no, it didn't get better. It got worse and worse and worse. You get to, what was it, episode 6, where you have a volcano explode right next to people, and they all survive. Yet somehow better in later episodes. Compared to the more boring setup of the first few. But Amazon cannot say the show is doing badly because they are pot committed to this production, which they have spent so much money on up front. That means at least a few more seasons, likely no matter how it performs. My prediction has kind of been season 3. By about season 3, if they've managed to achieve nothing in terms of people subscribing or people watching it, it's probably going to go away. They probably get to a point when it's cheaper to just pay off the contract, because their contract is 5 seasons. So in order to actually get out of that contract, they would have to pay money. So I think once they get to the point where, right, we can kind of get rid of it now, we can afford it a bit easier, I think you'll see it go away, and I think that will probably be round about season 3. That would probably be my guess. That means at least a few more seasons, likely, no matter how it performs. Albeit, one of the main takeaways of this piece seems to be that you can't buy your way to success. You cannot buy yourself a new Game of Thrones if the magic isn't there. You can't buy yourself a new Game of Thrones when you hire writers with no experience. And there are many questions to be raised about Rings of Power specifically, given its trusting of the series to 2 extremely green showrunners. From what I've seen, I doubt that Rings of Power will blossom into something incredible. It's again, you've got the same writers. What do we think they're going to get better in a year? Probably not. Probably they were already working on it when the first season was coming out. So I don't see them taking, from what they were saying, they were mentioning, it's going to be more sticking to the source material, when it's probably not. and it doesn't matter because you've already messed it up with season 1. To then go, oh, we're going to make it more accurate to the source material. Well, then you're just going to end up with something inconsistent. All the stuff you've done in season 1 is going to make no sense if you suddenly switch. It's like you're kind of stuck where you are. And that's what happens when you hire talentless writers. It may be fine, but it's not going to be Game of Thrones or really anywhere close. But there are no signs that Amazon's spending is slowing down much, and if anyone can continue to endlessly throw money at the problem, it's them. And that's probably, are they that clueless to just go, well, season 1 didn't work out, so just throw more money in? I think gradually when we go into season 2, maybe season 3, you're going to see that production budget come way down. So there's not going to be nice things to look at, even though a lot of the visuals weren't that good anyway. But there you have it. It was a success. Only 37%, only 37% people completed the series. That's not very good for a series you spent $1 billion on now, is it?